Hello, welcome to Arise with Christ. I'm Carolee Bailey.
And I'm Angeli Plojek. We share stories and truths related to the temple. Together with you, our hope is to fortify faith in Jesus Christ and experience joy in covenant keeping.
We recently spent time with Jane and Eli Griffin. Jane and Eli are two of the people that President Nelson must have been thinking of when he said, "My dear young friends, I love you. I thank you. I believe in you. As the Lord's prophet, I bless you to know the truth about who you are and to treasure the truth about what your glorious potential really is. I bless you to take charge of your own testimony, and I bless you to have the desire and strength to keep your covenants."
In our time visiting with them, Jane and Eli shared with us their aspirations and commitment to keeping their covenants. They are on the brink of some big life changes. We are happy to share our conversation with you.
Is there a young person in your life who would benefit from hearing from young adults who are pursuing righteous paths and lofty goals? Please share this episode with them. Every time an episode is shared, it broadens our reach.
Jane and Eli became good friends when Jane moved into Eli's ward in Lindon, Utah. They received their mission calls a week apart, both to the Philippines. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit, they were each reassigned to California. When Eli got home 6 months after Jane, he didn't waste any time asking her out, and a year later they were married. Jane and Eli just graduated from BYU, Jane with a degree in medical laboratory science, and Eli with a degree in molecular biology. In July of this year, they moved to Dallas, Texas, where Eli is now attending medical school.
We are here at the Griffin home. Jane and Eli Griffin are with us, and we're so grateful. Thanks for having us in your home today, Jane and Eli.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
We have something in common. Jane and Eli both served missions in the Philippines, and I did too. So I thought it might be fun for our listeners to hear a little bit about what you thought, Jane and Eli, maybe when you first got to the Philippines, about your initial impressions of the Filipino culture and the people. What were some of the things that stuck out to you?
So for me, I had never really traveled out of the country, let alone to a country, a developing country. And I was shaken sort of by the infrastructure and the heat. Mm-hmm. Those were my initial thoughts as we rode on the bus from the airport to the MTC. And the way the buildings are kind of ramshackle and it just feels really different. And it looks really different. So I was kind of like, whoa, like what have I gotten myself into here?
Yeah.
I kind of had the heat of the Philippines didn't bother me too much. And the humidity was just fine. The thing that stuck out to me was, like, one, how poor everyone was. And then even though people were poor, they were still really willing to feed us and share with us what they had, which, I feel like, Jane and I, we've gone through some times where we're making a lot less money and we tend to kind of clam up and not want to share as much money and not want to buy things. And that stuck out to me is that even though they have so little, they're still willing to give things away.
Yeah, that's very accurate.
Yeah, I remember one of the things that I love about the Filipino people is kain tayo. Like if you're walking down the street and someone is eating, they'll offer you half of what they have. Mm-hmm. And they would really give it to you if you were hungry. And that exemplifies the humility and kindness of the Filipino people to me too. Thank you for sharing those thoughts. I think that's awesome. I hope we get to talk a little bit more about the Philippines later as we go through our conversation today. You have a fun little love story. Will you just tell us about how you met and fell in love a little bit?
Yeah. So Jane moved from Lubbock, Texas to our ward in Lindon just before her senior year of high school. So I was going to my junior year of high school. And that year we didn't really interact too much. We had some interactions. There's kind of a funny interaction we had on a hike where I was reading a book and Jane tried to talk to me and I was a little bit annoyed because I was reading my book.
While you're hiking, you're reading.
That's the crazy part is I was doing this hike and I just moved from Texas. So I was coming up into this crazy altitude that I was not used to. So I was kind of struggling on this hike that, of course, Eli was not struggling on. He was reading Lord of the Rings, the full book while hiking. Like the thick book in his hands, not even looking at the trail. And I was like confused and impressed.
Confused and impressed. I love that. That's perfect.
Anyway, I didn't know him at all. I'd never spoken a word to him, but at one of our like little rest stops, Eli had sat on a rock and was just still reading. And I said, wow, I'm impressed that you're reading. And he kind of just like looked at me, gave me this look and didn't really respond. Yeah. And then like looked back down at his book.
It's funny because to me, I did respond, but my response was very brief. And that's kind of just how I communicated back
That's kind
then.
of how he is.
Yeah.
He's changed a little bit since then, but yeah.
I still use the smallest amount of words possible to get across my meaning.
Anyway, so after that point, we still didn't really know each other super well, but I was sort of, this new girl in the neighborhood who didn't really have friends, and the ward kind of took me under their wing. Actually, I have to credit Carolee's boys, Clark and Carson, who kind of just started inviting us to things, and Eli was often involved, and we just sort of, I think, were noticing each other across the room and things, and just ended up hanging out a lot, sort of texting and seeing, should we play ping pong? My ping pong skills are highly due to Eli's training. And then never really dated or did anything before we both left on our missions. I think it was due to some shyness and probably on both of our parts. Once we left on our missions, we did some emailing. We got called at very similar times to similar places and wrote some letters. I got back 6 months before Eli did, and I actually had a game night with Clark Bailey, and some other boys from the ward and girls from the ward. And there were some jokes made about Eli, and I had some snarky remark of, well, he's never said anything to me, like how he was waiting for me. But I had never heard that from his mouth. And then Clark sent Eli an email.
Oh.
What was your reaction to that email, Eli?
Oh, man. Well, I knew I liked Jane, and I always kind of thought that maybe we'd date when I got back, and that I didn't want to really say anything when I was a missionary. But then I was like, maybe I should say something. So I kind of wrote a very vague email to Jane.
So vague.
It's like, if you want to talk about, it was very vague, and I just kind of put the ball in her court.
Super non-committal.
Because I didn't want to commit to anything as a missionary, but then she wrote back and was more like, yeah, I do like you. Maybe we could date when you get back. And I was like, oh yeah, that'd be great. So,
and then the day he did get back, his mom invited me and some other friends to go to the airport, which felt kind of significant. I was like, I don't know. I don't know if I should go. I'm not his girlfriend. I'm his friend. But we did. And then that night he said I actually learned this later. Eli said it was like a half hour after he was released. He called me and asked me on a date for the next day.
Oh.
And then on that date, sort of slipped out of my mouth, I sort of meant to say, what are your dating plans? And are you, but what I said was, do you want to date?
So we have someone really direct and someone not super direct here.
But then Eli's response was, yeah. And I said, awesome. Are you sure you don't want to date anyone else? And he said, no.
Aww.
And then we started dating from that point, and it was pretty straight shot from there.
Love it. That is so great.
Yeah, you guys are awesome. And my boys do like to take some credit for playing a role.
They get some credit. They do.
Yeah, Clark did play a role at several stages of that. So
He did.
It's a catalyst.
It's been beautiful to watch. It's a fun thing. And we admire you and love you. And I think it's so inspiring in this day and age to watch people make choices to value family and covenants. You are both very bright people, very capable people, but you have chosen a route that's maybe different from the world for people your age and with your capabilities. But I would be interested in your thoughts about that, your thoughts about choosing to value marriage and entering into covenants and making a life together rather than a more selfish, more worldly approach. What are your thoughts about that?
I am really lucky to have thought about these topics a lot before I got married and before I was kind of entering into college, and decided that that was my priority. And it sort of seems like an easy thing going into BYU, like, oh yeah, I'm going to get married in the temple. But it's really not so straightforward. A lot of people struggle to remain temple worthy or find a partner who is, or continue to see value in the temple. And I just decided that was my priority. And I saw that in Eli. He's always been an example of service and steadfastness in the gospel. And I was really excited about that. So I felt that that was important. And it is easy to be swayed by voices of our age. You're right. It's a selfish sort of mentality that goes throughout our world. It's prioritize yourself. Your career is important. You're important. Your independence is important. And that's true. But if we know like where our actual priorities should be, I guess, the temple always felt important to me. And I knew that I would be going in the right direction if that was my goal.
One thing for me has just been recognizing, well, I think a lot of people outside the church would see us and say, or people that have left the church would see us and say, oh, you're just following what others are doing and you're not really thinking for yourself. But for me, it has been a choice. Like, I know a lot of people that have made choices different than I have, but I've made a choice to stay in the church and to keep believing, because I think there's, faith in a lot of ways is a choice. And then one sort of experience that I'll share is on my mission. I was going through kind of a rough patch. There was some stuff going on at home that I was concerned about. And my mission president was aware of what was going on. And he, during our monthly interview, he just read me a scripture about keeping your covenants and living happily. And he looked me in the eye and promised me that as long as I lived my covenants, that everything would go well and everything would be okay. And that was something that helped me in that time, in a time of uncertainty. But it's something that's kept me going forward, knowing that as long as I'm keeping my covenants and keeping the commandments, staying on the covenant path, that things will be okay. This last year, I applied to medical school. And for anyone that knows what it's like to apply to graduate school, especially medical school, is that it's very hard to get in. And any individual school has an acceptance rate between 3 and 5%. And there's just a lot of uncertainty in that whole process. But I remember thinking, maybe sort of a simplified thought, but we pay our tithing, we keep our covenants and we're going to be okay. And, luckily I did get into medical school. I don't know if that was directly from paying our tithing, but
also from a lot of hard work from Eli. Yeah.
I mean, also recognizing and expecting miracles is part of what we've been promised too. And I love that faith that you've exhibited there.
Yeah. And I'll kind of add a caveat to that my thought wasn't, oh, I'm definitely getting into medical school. My thought was just, whatever does happen, I know I'm going to be okay. If I have to apply again, or if I have to change my career path, that's okay. But I just know that since I'm on the right path, that things will work out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. It's going to work out.
I don't know if I have all the facts right here, Eli, but it's my understanding that you decided to go take the MCAT on a whim. Is that right?
I mean, it wasn't taking the MCAT on a whim, because you have to sign up months and months in advance. But I did, once I got my MCAT score back, I worked out some things with my counselor to graduate a semester early. And that same day, I just decided to apply to med school. So I started my application. A lot of people, anyone that's applied knows that it's a really long process, but I started my application at 5 p.m. and I finished it at 2 a.m. And I knew I was late, so I just did it really quickly. Possibly not the best strategy or the best application, but
effective nonetheless.
It worked out. I don't know.
Yeah, we weren't even planning on being in Texas or anywhere until next year. he was planning on graduating this December. But last summer, July or August, which is already late to apply to medical school, he decided, I think I can graduate early. Just did it. And, our life has greatly changed. But I think it was, some faith in the process, a lot of hard work from Eli, and yeah, all it worked out.
The confidence to do that comes from the Spirit, I think. I see that in my life, at least. A confidence to move forward with something that feels like, wait, maybe I should think this through differently. But that confidence to push through, I don't know. I think we can attribute that to the Spirit more often than not.
Well, thank you for sharing those thoughts about your choices and your priorities in your lives. I think it's really beautiful and admirable. I want to shift gears a little bit. I want to share a couple of quotes from President Nelson and then ask a question related to this. In April of 2021, President Nelson said in his talk, "Christ is risen, faith in him will move mountains." And so this directly relates to what you were just saying about exercising that faith and being willing to accept the result of what happened. But he said, "The gospel of Jesus Christ is exactly what is needed in this confused, contentious, and weary world." And he goes on to say, "It takes faith to follow prophets rather than pundits and popular opinion. It takes faith to serve a mission during a pandemic." And you both did that.
Yes.
And I love hearing missionary stories. And so I would love to hear your stories about your experiences connected to serving a mission during a pandemic and what that was like for both of you. And maybe we could start with your initial feelings of receiving your mission calls and what that was like, and then transition to some of your experiences as missionaries leading up to the pandemic.
Well, I received my mission call first, so maybe I'll go first. I got my mission call to the Philippines. I was super excited. I had always thought I would go Spanish speaking, but then when I opened the call and it said the Philippines and Tagalog speaking, I just knew that was where I was going to be, and I kind of pictured myself there, and it was really exciting for me. And a week later, Jane got her call, and it was the neighboring mission to mine. And I thought that was really cool. We're supposed to go to the same MTC, but I ended up they moved me and a bunch of other missionaries to the Philippines MTC. So we did see each other in the MTC though.
It was probably a good thing we were in separate MTCs because he was slightly distracting. Yeah.
And when was this? What year? And
so this is August of 2019 or earlier in the year.
We got called in April of 2019, right. And then we went out in August.
Yeah. So yeah, I received my call soon after Eli. The whole ward was pretty excited, and I was really excited. I was really nervous getting the whole process of preparing for my mission. I felt like I was kind of pushing forward with blind faith almost. Not blind, but I don't know. I just didn't know if I knew enough. I felt like I didn't know the gospel super deeply, but I was excited to go. And it was kind of a whirlwind, the whole beginning. And I remember my first day in the field, I felt like I just didn't know what I'd gotten myself into. I felt very unprepared, but ready to try my best.
Yeah. For me, going into the MTC, I was actually really excited to start. Like a week before my mission, I watched the movie The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. If you've ever seen that, it's like just a regular dude going on an adventure. There's like the scene where he jumps in a helicopter, and I was like, I'm jumping on this plane just like he jumped on a helicopter, and he didn't really know it was ahead, and I don't know it's ahead, but I'm just going forward, like sprinting into this thing. I got to the MTC, and that was still my idea. I knew that once I got into the field, it was going to be super hard because I wasn't going to understand the language or the culture. So I just decided to put my head down and learn as much as I could. And I kind of got that reputation in the MTC for being the nerdy guy who was always studying Tagalog. But yeah, the first part of my mission was actually really good. Being in the Philippines, the first few weeks were really hard adjusting, but I had kind of mentally prepared myself for that. I had said, I know I'm not going to be a good missionary at first. I know I'm not going to understand anything anyone's saying. And I'm just going to be patient with myself for my first transfer. And that worked out really well. One thing that became really hard early in my mission is, I think I mentioned earlier, I had some stuff going on at home. My parents got separated, and that was really tough to sort out in my mind because I had not seen that coming. And so adjusting to that might have been the hardest thing, is not being at home when all that was going on.
Yeah. My adjustment was I probably wasn't as well mentally prepared as Eli was. I really struggled with the heat. It was a big physical challenge. There's no air conditioning hardly anywhere. Maybe the church buildings that we were in, which is only a couple times a week, maybe.
Yeah, Filipinos, like, they blast the AC. It was always like 60 degrees in the AC rooms, and then it was like 95 degrees outside.
And in your apartments, there's no AC anywhere. And so it's a constant heat. And I kind of felt like a little bit of a trapped feeling. Our toilet in my bathroom did not flush automatically. We had to fill up a bucket and pour it into the toilet. That was a big deal. I remember my bedroom light did not turn on. Our laundry had to be rinsed, hung by hand, and there were salamanders on our house walls and stray cats and dogs everywhere. And for me, it was such a culture shock I didn't prepare myself very well for. So I sort of felt like I was floundering like a fish out of water. I just didn't really know what to do. I sort of felt like I didn't know how to be a person, like, in this new place. That took a lot of faith and a lot of prayer, a lot of kind of weepy prayers at night. I had the kindest trainer who was so sweet to me. She was a native Filipina, so she didn't totally understand a lot of the things that I was experiencing. She just didn't really get why it was so difficult, but was so gracious to me. And she was honestly probably the most massive blessing of the beginning of my mission. She was so good to me. She was so patient. She's like a foot shorter than me, so we looked ridiculous on the streets. But I knew that I was being looked out for by Heavenly Father in the beginning of my mission, because not everyone gets an experience like that. And I was so lucky to have her, and her have so much patience with me.
So, Carolee, you served in the Philippines as well. Were you in the same mission as either Eli or Jane?
No.
Okay. But I bet this brings back a lot of memories for you.
It does. I love it. I love talking to them and hearing them talk and sharing those thoughts. And I remember in my first area, laying in my bed, watching the gecko or the salamander on the wall, and watching as it was climbing down and approaching my scriptures on my desk. But I was worried about what it would do to my scriptures, if it would go to the bathroom or chew on them. Or anyway, I just remember thinking about that. And then the noises and the smells and it's the humidity of heat that is different. It's like a wall sometimes. But I love what you said, Jane, in talking about your trainer, because the people are what made it beautiful.
Yeah.
And the love that they have for each other and for their Savior, and their willingness to serve and sacrifice is unparalleled in my experience in across the culture. It's a uniquely Filipino characteristic in my experience. And I just love the beauty of the Filipino people.
Yeah, that was really how I got through, how I it was this incredible part of the mission, and really the most important part of the mission amidst all the adjustments I was going through. I knew that was why I was there, was because I was learning so much from them. I was so lucky to be able to, share with them this knowledge that I had about the gospel, and they taught me a lot about resilience and kindness in the midst of hardship and generosity. My goodness, we've talked about this already, but families who make 300 pesos in a day, which is about $6, will spend a ton of money to feed the missionaries for a huge meal, which almost doesn't even compute in my brain sometimes. But I learned about their humility. They were so willing to listen to this new hopeful message that we had. And, we saw a lot of blessings through that because of their humility and willingness to listen and be open to new information about, Christ and the gospel.
For me, I struggled with witnessing the poverty that you've mentioned and feeling this desire to do something about that. And yet that's not what I was there for. As missionaries, we're not there to physically feed them. We're there to spiritually feed them. And I had to draw often from that quote about teaching a man to fish, that if you teach them to fish, then how does it go? You give a man a fish,
You feed him for a day.
you feed him for a day, you teach him how to fish, you feed him for a lifetime, and then you teach them to teach how to fish, and you feed generations. And I just really had to draw on that a lot, that was our purpose there, to help them improve their own lives. And then that quote also from, they'll take themselves out of the gutter. They'll take themselves out of the slums.
You like taking the slums out of the people versus taking the people out of the slums or something?
I don't know.
Yeah, I'll have to find that quote. Anyway, but that idea is powerful when you're a missionary trying to process all those new experiences that you articulated so well. You're in the midst of having these experiences, and you both had been there a few months, and you'd probably processed a lot of that. You'd made those adjustments and kind of figured some things out, and you were probably starting to hit your stride a little bit as a missionary, I'm guessing, when the worldwide pandemic hit. Will you tell us about your experiences related to learning of the pandemic and then how that impacted you in the Philippines?
I remember it being this little rumor about there's something that originated somewhere in Asia and it popped up in California, and we were kind of like, it just didn't feel that serious. And then probably a couple days later, it did start to escalate a little bit, and we were told to wear masks. And then what felt like very quick, probably 2 days later, we got a general text throughout every Philippines mission that we were going on lockdown, complete lockdown, which is, for a missionary, it's like, what? You don't really understand how you're supposed to function at all. We were given, I think, 4,000 pesos each, which is like maybe 2,000 each. It's like $40 to go to the grocery store and load up on food to try to get us through 2 weeks was the predicted lockdown. So we all kind of raced to the grocery stores, which were packed. It felt a little bit like the end of the world. We had these lists to fill up on. We were filling up our carts with more food than we'd ever needed to buy. And we stood in line, I think, at the grocery store for 2.5 hours to check out. And by the time we had left the grocery store, there was a line outside just to get inside. That was probably 50 people long. We went back home with all of our things, had them all. Then the members had reached out to us. Some of them had, offered us a few things. And, that lockdown started. We really didn't know what to do with ourselves. We tried to do exercise inside of our apartments. And it was just a lot of unknowns. And then only a couple of days later, we were told, you're not even staying in the Philippines anymore. We're taking you out. And that notice we had was probably 1 day until we were removed from our missionary apartments. And then I was brought to a gigantic Marriott hotel that probably had 1,000 missionaries in it at that point.
Was that in Manila?
Yeah, this is in center of Manila.
I'm remembering, Jane, was there some difficulty with you getting from your mission to Manila?
Not me. We did hear some. So me and Eli both were fairly close to the Manila airport in our missions. We didn't have any of the having to sneak below the authorities or hide out. But I know Eli was in a packed MTC for a couple of days, people sleeping on the floors. Was that your experience?
Yeah. So maybe a little context. Like Jane said, we hadn't really heard much about the COVID pandemic. When you're a missionary, especially somewhere like the Philippines, you don't get world news, and you'll hear things from members and other people, but a lot of the stuff they say is not super accurate. Sometimes we kind of brushed off their warnings about this virus that was sweeping through China. I remember the first time I heard about it was in January, but yeah, it felt like almost fake, just like a rumor. And then I think in March, the beginning of March, they told us do fist bumps instead of handshakes. And then a week later, that's when everything started going crazy. So like it was the last week of the transfer. And like Jane said, they announced they were going to close province borders. And so that's when they told us to buy as much food as we could get because we might be stuck in our apartments for a long time. So that was on a Friday. We were buying all that stuff and stuck at the grocery store forever. And I think that was a pretty common experience for most missionaries. And then on Saturday, they shut down the province borders. So on that same day, they emptied out the MTC. And so suddenly I was training a new missionary. And I was like, the transfers were supposed to happen a few days later. So it was something I was a little bit, I was already kind of geared up for change, but not to suddenly be training a new missionary. The next day was Sunday and church was canceled, which was insane to us. Because I think at that point, there were only like 100 cases in the Philippines. But church was canceled, but we still went around and proselyted normally. It wasn't really any different. And then Monday, people started kind of treating us a little weird. Like people started canceling appointments because they were afraid of the pandemic. And I was like, that's so weird. Why are people canceling our appointments? And then on Tuesday was the day that they told us, don't go out at all. And then like 2 hours after they sent that text, they're like, actually, everyone's just going home. And so it was like a week.
It's a really fast progression.
Where we go from basically proselyting normally to everyone's going home. And I think at that point, like Hong Kong and Taiwan have been evacuated or something. But the Philippines was the first major country because the Philippines has 23 missions where Hong Kong and Taiwan combined is like 3 missions. And so that was just insane. I think there was like 1,800 missionaries they had to get out. And most of them they just took to the MTC, which can house tops like 300 missionaries. And so I remember we got to the MTC and they told us, don't send any pictures, don't communicate with anyone, because if the authorities find out that we're keeping 1,800 people in a place that's meant for 300 people, they'll probably just kick us all out. And then we won't have anywhere to go. You can't go back to your missions because the province borders are closed. And so that's going to be a major nightmare. And so I was in the MTC. Jane, I think, was just in her house because the airport was in her mission.
Yeah.
And so, we were sleeping on the floor. I slept in a different place, like for 5 nights in a row. And they were I remember they'd have these big meetings and they say, okay, we've chartered a 3rd plane. We've chartered a 4th plane. And they're like, we're trying to work on charting a 5th plane because that's how many we need to get everyone out. And so, they chartered 5 planes and we were in the MTC for like 5 days. And on Saturday, started loading us onto buses that got us into hotels right next to the airport. And on Sunday, we were on a plane home.
I remember extremely vividly in my mind the feeling on the airplane as we took off. And it got silent. And it was heavy. Like I've never really felt like that before. It was like everyone just felt the weight of what was happening. And I think after that point, once we got in the air, it was called to serve, maybe. A sort of chorus broke out on the airplane. And it was pretty powerful. It was just that we all were really feeling like a lot of unknowns, a lot of, wow, our lives are really changing right now. And we don't know what the future holds. But we were all kind of united in this cause, and it was kind of cool. I will never forget how I felt in that moment. It was very, very powerful.
Yeah, and one thing I'll also point out is they only sent home missionaries that were not from the Philippines. And so there were still probably 1,500 Filipino missionaries serving, maybe more. That's just kind of a guess, but I think it was about half and half. And they did a great job.
They were incredible.
Yeah. I think we were holding them back in a way.
Our missions numbers skyrocketed, actually, after we left.
Yeah.
Baptisms increased. people at church. Well, church, I believe, was held remotely as it was here.
It's kind of hard to compare like statistics because the criteria for going to church and everything changed, but I just know they did a really good job.
They did.
So, yeah.
That's one of those things that you wonder if the Lord had that in mind all along to help the Filipino missionaries step into that role and lead more and do more.
Yeah. The area presidency talked with us a lot while we were in the FTC going home. And I think it was Elder Bangerter, who was the second counselor, might have been Elder Schmutz, but he said, yeah, just a couple months ago, we were on a call with the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. And I'm not sure my facts are straight here. It's like I only heard it one time. But I think he said Elder Bednar spoke up and said, the time is coming soon where the Americans will have to back out of the Philippines and the Philippines will, sort of take the reins. And the COVID pandemic certainly facilitated that. And yeah, I think they did a really good job. I remember talking to some of my companions after I'd left and they were still stuck inside, but they were super effective. And so I was really impressed by that.
What some of our listeners may not know or understand is that there are many multi-generational, very strong families in the Philippines. Mm-hmm. And that, generations of missionaries within a family too. And the church is growing there. You said 23 missions. When I was there were 13 missions. Mm-hmm. And I've lost track of how many temples there are now, but there are a lot. I think it might be 13 temples
announced or under construction. There's only two.
There's only two functioning, which tells you
operating
how quickly the growth is happening in the Philippines because there's still only Manila and Cebu, I believe, but maybe three?
Urdaneta is that?
They just dedicated it.
3.
Recently, yeah.
But yeah, it's expanding so quickly. I mean, geographically, the Philippines is quite small, but having 23 missions just tells you how much the Lord is involved in the work there.
After being on that plane and having that profound experience and coming home, you were in that group of missionaries that was given a choice. Is that right? About your service, if you wanted to be reassigned or wait, was that?
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, we were. We both chose to be reassigned.
Yeah, the choice was either to go out right now or to wait a year. And
you could go right then stateside.
Yeah,
correct.
Stateside. And there's no guarantee that even waiting a year that we'd be able to go back to our missions. And I think that was a big thing for me is all the uncertainty. I just wanted to get back out and I didn't want to be in limbo for a year. But yeah, there was this choice of, do you want to wait a year or do you want to go out right now?
And we both chose the leave as soon as we could route. I got reassigned after, I think, 7 weeks is when I left again. Eli was longer than me, probably closer to 3 or 4 months.
Yeah, it took him a while to get me back out.
Yeah. But actually, if we had still waited the year, the Philippines missions were not open by that point. And I think it's only probably in the last 6 months, 9 months.
No.
Maybe longer.
No, there's been missionaries going back, but
that they've been open.
I think in 2021, they started sending people. But
I don't know the timelines, but.
So maybe I would have been able to go back. I don't know. But.
So will you share which missions you were in the Philippines and then where you were both reassigned?
So I started in Quezon City in the Philippines and I was reassigned to San Diego, California. And I was really lucky to be assigned to an area where there was actually a Tagalog speaking branch. So there's a lot of Filipino population in San Diego where I was.
Yeah, and I was in Antipolo, Philippines, which is right next to Quezon City. And I was reassigned to San Jose, California, which, like Jane, there's a lot of Filipinos there. And so I was able to speak Tagalog to a lot of people, which was fun.
Do either of you use Tagalog with any frequency now?
Not really.
I still sometimes have dreams about Tagalog, and I can still speak fluently in my dreams. So, and I also like to use certain words with Eli. Sometimes they will occasionally slip out with my other friends. And I'm like, oh, sorry. I've taught my sister Cami a few of them. And I have a couple of good friends who I knew who were missionaries with me in the Philippines. And we sometimes will have some kind of banter involving Filipino words, but not very fluently. I have a couple of Filipino coworkers, actually. Sometimes we'll just talk back and forth in Tagalog, which is kind of it's a privilege. It's really fun.
In light of your lives as busy students and pursuing medical school, and now you've both graduated from college, what has your temple worship looked like during that busy time? And how has that been a blessing to you? How has it blessed your life to have access to those covenants and the opportunity to worship in the temple?
You know, we're always working on it. We've gone through some times where we're really consistent, and we have tried to be better at making appointments. We probably went a couple of weeks ago, and it was a really powerful experience. We always are grateful that we've gone. Having our temple recommends updated is really important to us. And it's something that we are trying to become more consistent at, actually. But I really value it. Eli's grandma is really good at getting names, so he's almost always got a name to bring. I was able to be endowed for one of his family names last time, and that was powerful. I sometimes feel a little anxious for whatever reason in the temple, kind of like you can't go anywhere, can't move.
I think that's pretty common.
Yeah, it's funny. I never really expected that, but yeah, it's sort of developed in my life. So sometimes sitting there for an endowment for 2 hours is kind of difficult. I'm also a little bit just antsy. But as I was feeling some of those anxious feelings, I just kept thinking about that name that I had in my hand. And I just imagined her sitting next to me. And that was pretty powerful. I love to think about the names that I'm holding and the people that I'm participating in the covenant for. And that helps my temple worship be a lot more meaningful.
Yeah, neither of us chose very easy degrees. And we both were pretty much working all throughout college. So we've always been busy, but I never view that as a very good excuse, because I know there's always someone that's more busy than I am that's finding time to come to the temple. Sometimes during the semester when I had a lot going on, it was actually really stressful going to the temple because I had a big assignment due, or there's one time I had a bunch of grading to do before this deadline, and the deadline was like that night. And we were going to the temple, and it's like hard to get your mind off of that. One thing for me that's helped recently is, instead of thinking I'm going to the temple for me, because I think it really does bless your life to go to the temple, instead thinking I'm going to the temple for this person that I'm doing their ordinance for. I think that's a lot more motivating, at least for me. You know, like this morning, I got up really early to play basketball. I don't like getting up early to play basketball, and when I'm rolling out of bed, I don't really feel like it. But when I think about the fact that I'm the 10th guy and that I'm doing it for them, that gets me there. And so, kind of like going to the temple, like when I'm thinking there's this person that's waiting to have their ordinance done, and that gets me to the temple. And that makes the experience a lot more meaningful than I'm just doing it for me, because when I'm just doing it for me, then all the other stressors kick in, because then I'm thinking about all these other things I have to get done instead of thinking about someone else who's waiting for their work to get done.
I see with both of you this higher level thinking of something bigger than myself. That's powerful when we say, okay, I'm going to put my own selfish desires. We talked about this a little bit at the beginning, just with the decision to be married and sealed. And I'm going to put those things aside in lieu for something better and something bigger than me. That's really powerful.
Thinking about what lies ahead for you both in the near future as you transition, move to Texas, and Eli begins medical school, I'm thinking about the experience that Elder Renlund has shared before about, at some point in his medical training on a Sunday, coming home and recognizing, actually, if he waited to come home, that his wife and daughter would have already left for church. And then he could lay down and rest on the couch, and deciding to do that. And then feeling badly about it. And at that point, he made this decision, okay, I won't do that again. There will be a lot of pressure. And I know you know this. I know you both have talked about this. You're fully aware of these things. But I'm curious about your thoughts related to navigating this. Because medical school and training and residency, your schedule is not your own. It's kind of like you're submitting your time to be dictated by another entity. How are you preparing to navigate that situation and circumstance as a couple and a family?
Well, for me, I'm the one who has to go through all the classes and the studying. And I know it's going to be really hard. I've had times of my life where I've been super busy, but I know that you can always fit in scripture study and prayer. It actually doesn't take that much time, and it still is a choice. My mind actually goes to different conference talk, and I can't remember Peter M. Johnson, maybe.
That sounds familiar.
His conference talk was reading the Book of Mormon every day. And I remember he said everything, like every day. But he shared an experience where he was in graduate school and he was really struggling and falling behind. And his little goal he made to himself was to read the Book of Mormon every semester. And I think a goal like that would be really helpful to me. It's just, I know that medical school is going to be hard, but I know I'll have the time for that if I budget that out. So that's where my mind has gone to, is I still have time for it, and that I should keep reading the Book of Mormon and keep doing everything I can. I think Elder Renlund had a good point. It might have been in that talk or maybe a different talk where he talked about just how hard it was missing sacrament. He was a heart surgeon. If someone's heart is failing, he might have to skip sacrament, but just doing your best to keep those covenants, even though I might not always be able to make it to church.
Yeah, and I'm also going into a career where most employees are required to work some weekends, usually like a weekend a month. And that's not my optimal choice, but I know that we are going to, we've made goals to continue prioritizing sacrament meeting. And Eli even has thought about what specialty he's going to choose and how that can be conducive to having a family. He's not completely set on this, but he's thought about anesthesia for the reason that the hours are a little bit more flexible. There's less random call times or having to go into the hospital at random hours, because he wants to be available for our kids. And he said that, and to be available at home, which I really admire and I'm really grateful for. So we're just going to keep working around our busy schedules and keep making that a priority.
We love to ask our guests, how would you encourage someone to arise with Christ?
So I haven't talked about this a ton in our discussion so far, but one of the most powerful things about the pandemic for me while in my reassignment in San Diego was that I got time to deeply delve into the Book of Mormon and its geography, its family trees, who the prophets were, how the Book of Mormon is organized, the timelines. And it was probably the most formative experience that has solidified my faith throughout my entire mission. And that would not have happened if I didn't have 2 hours a day to study my scriptures. I drew out diagrams, and I'm not suggesting that everyone has that kind of time. It was a blessing that I had through COVID, but I would encourage people to dive into the Book of Mormon because it is powerful and it is beautiful. And it's one of the parts of my testimony that I don't think I'll ever be able to deny or to ever believe that it's not inspired and of God. And it's a huge part of my testimony, and it is so worth my time, and I would say everyone's time, to study it and become familiar with the words in it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I can add anything that isn't constantly reiterated in general conference, or I think reading your scriptures, attending the temple, always attending sacrament meeting, never making an excuse not to attend sacrament meeting, and keeping your covenants. Those are the most important things to me. And I'll add, we're not perfect. We've been sharing our experiences, but it's a struggle sometimes to read the Book of Mormon every day, and some, we've gone sometimes where we've had a few months without going to the temple, and we've kind of felt it. But just, I'd say just struggling. I feel like there's a better word for this, but I'm drawing a blank. But just constantly struggling and trying to do better and trying to be better on those habits. And I mean, that's what I'd say is the best way to continue strong in the gospel.
Persevering, not giving up if you don't achieve perfection.
Yeah.
Usually that is our last question, but I have one other question I want to ask. Because we began by talking about your initial exposure to the Filipino people and their culture, I'm interested in your takeaway. How has your experience loving and serving with and among the Filipino people blessed your life and changed you?
I was blessed by seeing how they prioritize their lives. People are their biggest priority. They often don't know where their next meal is coming from. Their homes are very humble, but their faith was so strong, and they just didn't care about so many of the things that we care about, or that it feels like we prioritize here, like status or nice things or nice homes. And that was powerful. Just faith in the midst of hardship, which has really motivated me throughout a lot of, things that I've experienced in my life.
Yeah. There were lots of things that were great about the Philippines, lots of things that were not so great. I think wherever you go, that people are people, and we need to, we can't view ourselves as better than them because we were born in the United States, or that we're really equal to them and we should treat them as we'd like to be treated.
That actually reminds me of something I thought about a lot. I thought about the value of souls a lot in the Philippines. I would think of my life where I've gone to school for, 12 years, now 16, been educated, been fully fueled with all the nutrients that I needed. And I would compare myself to, someone who lives in the rural Philippines, who's not literate, who essentially only knows how to farm rice, who has struggled for food their entire lives, and how there is zero difference in my value to God between me and this person. And even though life is so much harder, they have been taught a lot less. In the world standards, they know a lot less, that they mean the exact same and they have the exact same value. And I really saw that when I was trying to teach people. I could see how much they were valued to God and how lucky I was to be interacting with all these people.
We are grateful that you joined us today. Do you love Arise with Christ? We would appreciate you sharing it with a friend. As a new podcast, your support means the world. Will you subscribe and leave a review on your favorite listening platform? Thanks.